Yes, hi there and welcome back. In the background of today's video, you can see a picture showcasing the most renowned tomb discovery in the world, the tomb of Tutankhamun, also known as King Tut. What's the deal with this? The question we are exploring today is this tomb real or a forgery? The second inquiry we yield to is the mummy authentic? Is it genuinely Tutankhamun in the tomb of Amun or not? And if it is indeed a forgery, then the ultimate question to inquire would be, why? Why would someone engage in such a fraudulent act? What are the true reasons behind it? And we will reveal the backgrounds for that today. Therefore, after the story about the tomb is disclosed, because you will surely have never heard it in this form before, we have been able to draw very interesting conclusions about the 18th dynasty. Because I have the ability to reveal one thing, it actually is also connected to certain biblical events that are not intended to be linked together. And that is why the 18th dynasty, to which Tutankhamun also belongs, is indeed one of the most interesting, spectacular, and craziest. So, look forward to today's video. Here we go. Yes, in 1922, the famous Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun. It should be noted that Tutankhamun was only later called Tutankhamun, as he was actually named Tutenchamun from birth. Okay, we'll clarify later why it was like that and why the name was changed, very important. He was officially recognized as the son of Akhenaten, also known as Amenhotep IV, and Nefertiti, the Queen of Egypt. And here indeed some opinions differ. Some actually say it is the child of Akhenaten and only for perpetrators. Some individuals claim that it was the offspring of Akhenaten and his secondary spouse Kia. Others state that Kita was a nickname for Nofret, and they are completely identical in every way. In any case, he was reportedly a biological son of Akhenaten. All right, when you examine the images of the burial chamber of Tutankhamun himself, you can observe several noteworthy things that provide valuable insights. As an illustration, one gets the impression of standing in a clothes bin or a cluttered room where all items are haphazardly scattered across the floor. Nothing is neatly arranged or organized in any way. The overall atmosphere is chaotic and disorganized, giving a sense of disorder and lack of structure. In a similar vein, it was later uncovered that all of the items, and this is applicable to each and every item, were in fact previously owned. Several years ago, there was an additional investigation carried out by Nicholas Reeves, a British archaeologist and Egyptologist. This investigation revealed that the famous and beautiful mask of Tutankhamun was not actually meant for him. In fact, it was intended for a woman. Yes, astonishingly, the mask that is widely associated with Tutankhamun was originally created for a female. This is apparent from the examination, for instance, of an inscription that was discovered on certain objects during the investigation. It was discovered, for instance, that his name, which was written over by another individual, was recently confirmed through microscopic examinations, as has been revealed. However, it was not just any name, but rather the name of someone significant. I find that very characteristic. I also see this as a direct indication that the new pharaoh was never actually buried in Egypt. You just can't find it right now. In the event that Nefertiti wears the mask, she did not employ or make use of it in any way. Akhenaten and Nefertiti reportedly killed. If so, they would be buried somewhere. We will also clarify at some point what really happened to Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The Egyptologist Dr. Jasmine El-Chazli determined that the death mask of Tutankhamun consisted of two parts and was welded together. Then they additionally discovered fluids for embalming in the head, indicating that the mask was later, and this is of utmost importance, attached to the head using glue. Typically, it should be noted that death masks are invariably made from a solitary piece. So everything is exceedingly peculiar, and there are unequivocally no coincidences. I always make a point to emphasize. If 3, 4, 5 little things are inconsistent, then you can also say, well, okay. But with the number that I will list for you shortly, it becomes really difficult to believe an official explanation that we are told. But more on that shortly. The ears of this mask were designed with openings specifically for earrings, a feature that was not present in the case of masks intended for male wearers. The storage containers, for example, the canopic jars, are called that there. For the organs, they bore female faces and not typically male, as they should have been, and they differ significantly from the face of the death mask. Dr. Robert Cornelli, an anthropologist at the University of Liverpool, collaborated with a forensic expert, an Egyptian archaeological forensic expert, Dr. Matthew Pointy, in collaboration with a scanning electron microscope, made the groundbreaking discovery that the mummy housed within the sarcophagus had suffered internal burning as a result of an improper embalming process involving oxygen and linen. The contact between these elements triggered a chemical reaction, highlighting the importance of proper embalming techniques to prevent such incidents from occurring. So, sloppy work was done here, and in this chemical reaction, the body is heated to over 200 degrees. One could almost say cooked. And that also explains the dreadful condition of this mummy as it was discovered in that state when the sarcophagus was opened. A typical question I would ask in this case would be, okay, was that intentional or not? Did they want it to be like that or not? Maybe it's not even Tutankhamun in there. The mummy has been disfigured so that it cannot be precisely identified. These are the questions that arise. Okay, numerous grave goods, in addition to that, are not well crafted, extremely sloppy. Once again, this does not speak well for a king. Also, a very valuable and beautifully decorated knife was among the burial offerings. Which king did it belong to? From Mitanni, with Tannian, located in the north at the former Egyptian border, extending far up, passing through Palestine, Israel, and along the Turkish border, there lay Mitanni. It's crucial with future tech in archaeology. You'll learn more about it. Well, in any case, it was a gift that was given to me by this King Tushratta from Mythilia. However, this knife was not intended for Tutankhamun, but for the pharaoh Amenhotep III. How this knife ends up in Tutankhamun's tomb is a mystery. In November 2017, it was revealed that there were over 100 decorative fittings in the tomb depicting motifs of fighting animals and goats on the Tree of Life. This is not typical of Egyptian art. This kind of artistic skill was not recognized in Egypt. It had its origins in Syria, where trade was also prevalent. For more than 9 decades, these fittings were stored in a box without being made available to the public. Why would someone take such action? There appears to be a contradiction. If inadequately preserved second-hand items are discovered in a tomb belonging to a king, but conversely, there are more than 100 imported fittings made of solid gold, then it raises the question, would the Egyptians have permitted the inclusion of items from different cultures in a tomb that is meant exclusively for royal Egyptians? Unless, as already mentioned, the Egyptian kings are more closely connected to Methanians than we believe. Nevertheless, that would be a subject for a separate video. Was it a piece of ancient homeland? There are even traditions that there are cuneiform inscriptions addressed to the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III. Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, documented in the ancient script called cuneiform writing, but it is an affront to the pharaoh, because it was customary at the time, of course, to write the greatest king of the known world in hieroglyphic script. Well, the Mitanni did not do that. They sent the cuneiform. Why? Because they could read them, as it was part of their old homeland and poses no threat to Egypt. I'll explain this in more detail in another video. In any case, it is true that all artifacts found in Tutankhamun's tomb exhibit varying qualities. And typically, the king takes with him to the grave whatever is his personal belongings and possessions. And many things were not his personal belongings. Inside, diverse eras, cultures attributed to other pharaohs, uniqueness and variety make it truly exceptional. Perhaps you already have a suspicion. The tomb is positioned in a very unfavorable manner in terms of its location. This is because the actual burial chamber is not larger than the antechambers, which is also atypical. And the whole complex is actually very modestly designed. Does this match the greatest discovery in human history? According to Chris Norton, the director of the Egypt Exploration Society, it was explicitly stated that there was no doubt that this tomb was specifically intended for a woman. All male burial chambers were currently being constructed to the left of the entrance at that time, and all female ones on the right side of the entrance, which in this case also suggests a female tomb. Similarly, there exist images in the burial chambers that can be traced back to the era of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, who were his parents. These images depicted the deity Aten. Following the demise of Akhenaten, every piece of evidence and all remnants of the faith in Aten were entirely eradicated across the entirety of Egypt. Everything was destroyed. If Tutankhamun had actually been allowed to take images and paintings of Amun into the tomb, for which he had to change his name. Therefore, from Tut finally Atum to Tut finally Amun, it is very unlikely. However, images were discovered in his tomb. The rulers would never have permitted this, in my opinion, as it would have been considered sacrilegious against Amun, the deity. For instance, the portrait on the throne in the tomb depicts Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which is not normally allowed and excludes the depiction of the human Tutankhamun. Some even consider the throne chair to be a poor forgery, as its style of depiction completely deviates from that of the time when Akhenaten ruled. I cannot confirm that. I am not an Egyptologist. It has definitely been criticized. If this chair truly belonged to or was made for Nefertiti, the prescribed style of representation and portraiture by her would certainly have been employed on this chair, indicating its authenticity and historical significance. And why, as previously mentioned, are there no personal belongings of his included in the tomb? He was king for a sufficient duration to have ownership of these. The pharaohs typically brought their personal items, their personal belongings for the afterlife, into the tomb. Even the statues found in the tomb of Tutankhamun depict women with breasts. As mentioned, the history of the entire 18th dynasty is extremely unusual and highly questionable at the same time. However, it is also one of the most significant dynasties due to its involvement in biblical times. Is it possible that intentional gaps have been left and reigns distorted in order to align with stories from the Bible as a means of reinforcing religious narratives? Let's consider it. After this discussion regarding Tutankhamun's tomb, let's have a more intensive conversation about it. Amenophis, also known as Britta, was the father of Eknat. Okay, Eknaton's name would have been normal too. Armeno Fiesta IV is another name associated with Amenophis. He had an additional son called Tutmoses. The one who was born by Tod is the meaning of it. Nevertheless, he passed away at a young age, and Akhenaten ascended to the throne. His name is even preserved on the sarcophagus of his feline companion. Therefore, we have a plethora of confirmations that he did indeed exist as a historical figure. This is in reference to Moses. There is scarcely any reported information about him. Let us take a moment to reflect on this and consider its significance. Neither the reason for his death nor the whereabouts of his burial place are known. I discovered that to be extremely fascinating as well. He passed away at a comparable age to the age at which Tutankhamun is believed to have passed away. Some individuals even believe that Thutmose is Moses himself, but that is not accurate. I have extensively revealed this in my book, Moses' Path of Truth. Thutmose was also titled as Crown Prince, Overseer of the East, as well as Upper and Lower Egypt, High Priest of Ptah in Memphis. He was one of the most important figures of his time. Is it possible that the mummy located in the tomb could actually be this Thutmose instead of Tutankhamun, the renowned pharaoh of ancient Egypt? And then one also wonders, why is this mummy of Tutankhamun, or Thutmose, perhaps so poorly preserved? It is highly improbable that such a large number of errors were committed during the embalming process of a monarch to the extent that the flesh of the mummy inside the sarcophagus has been completely charred and cannot be identified. Did they perhaps want to make it unrecognizable? Did they perhaps want to deliberately conceal everything? In the end, perhaps neither Tutankhamun nor Tutmoses lie in this sarcophagus. In any case, it appears that this tomb was actually intended for Nefertiti, but was never used, as Akhenaten and Nefertiti were supposed to be erased from history. I have another highlight in the chain of evidence, namely the wall paintings. It's getting more colorful, I'm telling you. The colors have actually hardly faded at all. They are very dark and very intense, which is not typical. The dark spots, however, that are seen on the paintings have recently been attributed to a fungus that only develops when the tomb is sealed with wet paint, according to the latest findings and analysis of experts in the field. Egyptologists assert that, well, following the demise of a pharaoh, there is a limited time frame of only 70 days to carry out the burial process. The tomb would not have been completed at the time of his death, which is why there was a need to hurry. But I don't believe that. That's contradictory and generalized, and upon reflection, not correct either. Why? The work on Akhenaten's tomb for his father, for example, began when he was still a young child. Therefore, it is absolutely certain that he would have undoubtedly done the same for his son. We can safely assume, without any doubt, that Akhenaten, or Tutankhamun himself, would have initiated the construction of his tomb at a very young age. Taking into account the alleged serious illnesses he had since childhood, or the illnesses he had suffered from, it would be even more logical to commence the construction of the tomb at a young age. That would make sense considering the circumstances and the need for early planning. And if they purportedly had it so genuine, then the subsequent inquiry to pose would be why they did not just take his father's tomb, Akhenaten. Because that particular tomb was not utilized, it was left empty and untouched. Based on the brushstrokes, I would estimate that this inaccurate and messy painting of the tomb was completed in just 1 week. Nevertheless, they actually had a total of 70 days available for the task. So there would have been enough time to begin the wall paintings at the start of the 70 days and then let them dry. After a period of 70 days, they are completely dry, which surely would not have been painted at the end before placing all the objects and grave goods in the tomb. That doesn't make sense. You paint first before moving into the apartment. And then it was just a small burial chamber. And it's also noticeable that all the other rooms aren't painted, only this room. What happened, my dear ones? Once again, the 18th dynasty seems truly remarkable, and at the same time the strangest of all. Absence of data, fabricated king lists, apparently fabricated tombs, pharaohs without mummies, and questionable family relationships. And of course, this happened coincidentally during a time when significant events were taking place in the Bible. To me, it is clear that someone wanted to cover something up here. I have been able to reveal quite a bit by now. But now, we must ask ourselves the question that perhaps many historians have already asked. Was the unearthing of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter a monumental spectacle that captivated the world with its significance and treasures? Was a disfigured and foreign corpse brought here, from which not much is to be expected? As far as identification is concerned, fits. Could the burial chamber have been prepared and painted beforehand? Quickly? Fits. Were different objects brought from other burial chambers to create a deception in this place? It appears to be the case. It would actually be the most logical explanation among all of the theories. It explains the issue with the vibrant color that is full of fungi. Funerary items from different origins that were not in the possession of Tutankhamun, the ancient pharaoh of Egypt. The explanation provides details that there was only one burial chamber that was painted, that everything was randomly draped, that the wrong throne was placed, and that the mask has a noticeable seam in it. It would also clarify the unusual style of the images for that particular time. They employed a tomb originally intended for a woman. During the time of Howard Carter, the field of Egyptology was still in its early stages. There wasn't much information available yet regarding the customs of the pharaohs. It was believed that no one else would observe or pay attention to the pharaohs themselves. It was like that at that point in time. It functioned effectively for approximately 100 years. But now? Now, it raises many questions that cast doubt on the credibility of this archaeologist. We do not intend to defame anyone here. We just want to uncover the truth. Howard Carter, and this is a fact, was unsuccessful for over 5 years. He needed results to satisfy his private financier, Lord Carnarvon. What do I do now to prevent my funds from being cut off? Perhaps religious interests also played a very significant role. That has not been considered by anyone yet. If in fact a multitude of biblical events occurred concurrently and the true history of Egypt is revealed, one could connect the puzzle pieces and thoroughly examine the truthfulness and reliability of the Bible's accounts and narratives. And so, in order to ultimately determine the years rationally, is that what you desire? Was there someone who did not want us to uncover the truth and provided funding for a diversion? Well, that wouldn't be the first time something like that is done, but rather routine. On the contrary. Combining the cats, they simply placed the mummy of Thutmose in the unfinished tomb, originally intended for Nefertiti, creating a unique juxtaposition of ancient artifacts. After all, even a whip was found in the tomb chamber that did not bear the name of Tutankhamun, but that of Thutmose. A depiction was also found showing a pharaoh riding against the Ethiopians and defeating them. However, this did not happen during Tutankhamun's reign. The field of Egyptology acknowledges that such an event occurred during the rule of Thutmose, in which he actively participated. In the tomb, a single strand of hair belonging to the mother of Thutmose, who was the grandmother of Tutankhamun, was also discovered. Tutankhamun? Yes. Did the ill trainer carry and keep Tutankhamun with him for over 20 years and then take Tutankhamun with him to the grave? Alternatively, it is possible that the mother of Thutmose, considering Thutmose's premature death preceding his mother's, deliberately placed one of her own strands of hair inside her son's tomb as a sentimental gesture. Genetic studies, my dear ones, have revealed that Tutankhamun, or the one who lies within, shares 70% identical genes, and this is astonishing, 70% identical genes with all Scots and their hats, and only 1% with Egyptians and Africans. His mother, as we still know, came from Mithymien. Oh, have a look over there. But also the mother of Thutmose originated from Mithymien. They all came from the same lineage. I can't prove all of this, but I have hundreds of clues, indications, and bits of evidence for this entire derivation. However, Egyptology also cannot provide definitive proof. In reality, they solely possess theories, and their explanations lack persuasiveness upon thorough examination. Therefore, it is advisable to form your own judgment regarding this matter. Many suspected, some even in the past, that Howard Carter moved the sensitive items into side rooms, which he then walled up and plastered over. No, that was a conspiracy theory. In fact, it has been proven today through radar investigations that there are indeed 2 more small hidden chambers that would have been accessible through the painted burial chamber as indicated by the recent findings. However, the authorities are adamant in their refusal to open these rooms, which also strongly indicates that the truth should not come to light here. An agreement has been reached between the relevant parties involved in this matter. This myth is truly one that we derive great pleasure from maintaining. Perhaps we would uncover more valuable clues if it were to be opened, suggesting that certain biblical events associated with it were actually quite different from what is commonly believed or portrayed in historical accounts. I would like to add that the wall painting, atypical for the 18th dynasty, bore a striking resemblance to the one in the tomb in the Valley of the Kings, which Howard Carter had previously discovered and studied. This served as the template for this supposed tomb of Tutankhamun. However, Carter needed help in executing his plans, and thus he created with a conspirator. If that was the case, it was truly the curse of death, as there are movies about it, like The Curse of Tutankhamun and The Mummy's Curse, where 12 of those involved in the conspiracy died within 6 years of the tomb's opening. Or maybe other powers were involved in this situation. After a span of 8 years, it is true that there were still 2 individuals from the initial team who remained involved. Howard Carter himself, the half-brother of his financier Lord Carnegie, tragically took his own life. And subsequently, in a peculiar manner, an additional 21 individuals who had been linked to the excavation perished. Was the undisclosed information still secure, or was there a potential risk? Howard Carter would have never imagined, never, that in a few decades there would be remarkable advancements such as radar technology, genetic engineering, DNA analysis, and the incredible capabilities of electron microscopy. In the early days of Egyptology, they didn't know what they were doing in children's schools. Carter probably didn't know men are buried on the left, women on the right from entrance. That's why it wasn't a problem for him to take a grave where only women are buried. Today we know that, of course, yes, through many writings that have been translated. Back then, it wasn't quite like that. Yes, so due to the additional archaeological discoveries we've had, Egyptology, which has continued to evolve, is revealing more and more. We can establish a connection between the dots. It's vital to form your own opinion, dear ones. Was it really so? Was it not really so? Fact or fiction? Has the secret in Tutankhamun finally been revealed in a way that confirms it as a forgery, indicating that the tomb was intended for someone else, and that the mummy inside is indeed that of Thutmose? And now we come to something that will be completely new and unprecedented. I'll explain a little bit about the connections to you, in case you want to know them. They are actually extremely fascinating, the connections, why one does such things. Was it truly only an interest driven solely by the pursuit of wealth? Or is there a deeper motivation behind it that we are unaware of? I couldn't imagine that it is done exclusively out of ego reasons and solely for financial means. There must be additional information, as every generation in the 18th dynasty possesses a highly distinctive and unusual constellation pattern. There must be connections present here that they want to keep hidden from us, but which are now slowly and gradually becoming more and more apparent to everyone. Allow us to go back in history. Allow us to travel to Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III was married to a woman during his reign. This woman named TJ entered into matrimony with Amenephis III, forming a marital union that would endure through the annals of history. Currently, there are the Amarna letters exchanged between Mitanni and Egypt. At present, we can read a total of 400 of them. I have taken the effort to read some of them that are related to it in order to comprehend. And it is abundantly clear that the wife of Amenhotep III is undoubtedly from the ancient civilization of Mitanni in the Near East region. All right, now let's proceed to his son Akhenaten. Akhenaten entered into matrimony with Nefertiti, as there are well-established customs that explicitly suggest, including the Amarna letters, that she was also recognized as Tadu Hepat in Mitanni and was the offspring of the ruler. She hailed from Mitanni and held the title of a princess. Ultimately, she became the wife of Akhenaten, solidifying their union and playing a significant role in the history of ancient Egypt. Their Egyptian name was then Nefertiti. They had other names in every culture. They were also called differently among the Hittites. That must be mentioned. Then one also understands why a person often has very, very many different names. All right. At this point, we currently possess a pharaoh who is married to a woman made of metal. Additionally, his son is also married to a woman from Methania. And then the field of Egyptology enters the picture and states, hold on a second, Nefertiti was actually the cousin of Akhenaten. This would also reveal that Akhenaten also received aid. Oh no. The body, the mummy believed to be Tutankhamun's and other mummies, underwent examinations by Egyptology, and it was determined that they share the same genes as 70% of all Irish and Scots, but only 1% of all Egyptians and 50% of all Europeans. This finding indicates that Akhenaten had support and raises questions about the origins of these mummies and their genetic connections to different populations. At this juncture, we are able to make the assumption that all ancestors of the 18th dynasty and all pharaohs of the 18th dynasty are, without a shadow of a doubt, at the very least probably of Irish-Scottish origin. When they reached Egypt, we'll clarify that later in another video. But now, as I just mentioned, they came from Mitanni and not from Scotland or Ireland. Yes, because they didn't come directly from Ireland and Scotland. but via a detour. This deviation was a midday detour in an Indo-European language tattoo, which was a deviation from the original path of the journey. Hepet was the name of the god who was associated with the sun. Akhenaten's exact action was to establish a belief in Aten, the sun god, in a specific and deliberate manner, exactly as he had intended and envisioned it to be. This implies that the Scots ultimately travelled to Mitanni and from there supplied the Egyptian kings and pharaohs with what they needed. Moving on after this 18th dynasty to Harem-Hab, which signified the conclusion of the dynasty. Later came the Ramesside dynasty, and there too they talk about Ramses II, with red hair, red blonde, 1.90 meters tall, and so on. So this truly operates like a crimson thread that runs throughout the entirety of Egyptian history. Very thrilling. If from Ireland and Scotland then, as stated surely with certainty, also an ancient Atlantean legacy, which appears logical. So now we know Tutenchamun is said to have been the son of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. There is concrete evidence that at least definitely from Akhenaten and a woman named Kia, who was supposed to have been a secondary wife of Akhenaten, a strong connection can be established. Yes, we have found out that Kitcher is identical to Nofretete. Then he was supposed to have had another concubine named Tado-Heped. Yes, that was the new name. In principle, these three names can be attributed to a single person, and that would make it evident to me that it is, without a doubt, the son of Akhenaten, leaving no room for uncertainty or confusion in my mind. So, what actually happened to him? Where is the real one? We will definitely look into that matter and conduct a thorough investigation. And now it becomes truly exhilarating when I simultaneously delve into the rich and profound biblical texts. For instance, an individual traces the occurrences of Abraham, Isaac, and Rebekah, as well as the son Jacob, who is later renamed Israel, back to the 17th to 20th centuries BC. The story in Egypt with Akhenaten and others occurred in the 14th century BC. There is a time span of approximately 300 to 700 years between them. Is that information accurate? I'll give you two examples. In my book today, there are 100. The progeny of Abraham, specifically Isaac, entered into wedlock with Rebekah. It is mentioned that Rebekah was of Aramean origin. So, wait a moment. The Arameans are historically documented to be mentioned exclusively starting from the year 1380 BC and onwards in historical records. I am curious about how one determines the time period between the 17th and 20th centuries BC. All right, there were two individuals who were descendants of Jacob, and both of them were given the name Joseph. Joseph is said to have ultimately ended up in prison, serving as a slave in Egypt, and eventually risen to the position of the pharaoh's vizier through his exceptional skills in interpreting dreams. Yeah, I get it, right? From dishwasher, not even a dishwasher, from prisoner to millionaire. A dreamlike tale, truly. If not for the Papyrus d'Ordon in Egypt, with an Egyptian fairy tale that recounts Joseph's story, would it exist? Thus, this Bible author replicated it from the papyrus. The narrative never unfolded in such a way as this. My beloved ones, why did you not witness it as it truly was, unfolding before our eyes? To be honest, the Egyptians possessed a larger quantity of oracles, astronomers, and fortune tellers at their royal court compared to any other cultures, and these individuals were consistently present. They need Joseph, who they'll have to appoint as vizier because he can interpret dreams. Yeah, it's clear. No, it has a completely different reason. According to the Bible, Joseph received something from a pharaoh, but they do not provide us with information regarding the specific identity of the pharaoh in question. Also strange. Why not mention any names? Why not mention any years? Sure, there were different calendars, but at least one could convert to their own calendar. Or the names of the pharaohs or the places. Yes, because they want to leave it open. Because they want to create space for interpretation so that the truth does not come out. If one desires to make the Bible credible, the Old Testament, which I am referring to, then one would support it with specific dates and names, would they not? But we possess more information today, because Joseph was assured the land of Goshen as a promise from Pharaoh. Now, the biblical scholars went and said, the Bible historians, yes, it must be somewhere down there in Palestine. Of course, they have to decree it that way. They have no other choice to fulfill their biblical prophecies. That was in the incorrect location, not in the desired position that one wants it to be in. There used to be the district and the land of Goshen there. Otherwise, this name is nowhere else to be found. And it's interesting that it's just back with Handian. Oh, look there. And this land, hold on tightly, this land, Goshen, and that is why I also received confirmation here, was even referred to as the land of Ramesses in the Bible itself. And at this very moment, I sit there thinking, wait, the first Ramses is mentioned in the year 1294 BC, and not before that particular time. Are they still attempting to inform me that the enjoyment occurred in the 17th to 20th century before Christ? Do historians have knowledge of what I'm discussing in the Bible? I think they do. Why don't they question that? He should have noticed that too. So, if we assume that the first Arameans are mentioned in 1380 BC and the first Ramessides in 1294, there are about 90 years between them. 85 years, that fits perfectly, because Isaac and Rebekah, here it comes, were born at that time during the era of the Arameans, precisely when the Arameans were in power and exerting influence over the region. Logically, Rebekah was Aramean, so she must have lived at some point around 1370, 60, 50. So then she met Isaac, they begot the child Joseph, who is not the grandson, I believe, as far as I can follow correctly. That brings us to 1294 within the framework of 7. It fits perfectly into the timeline. That's no coincidence. And if I were to now provide you with an additional 20 arguments similar to these, then it is already starting to work up here and work here effectively. Hence, it can be deduced that the time of Abraham, Isaac, and Rebekah aligns exactly with the era of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, signifying a notable historical correlation between the two. Wow, that is indeed true. And that explanation is incredibly illuminating and provides a lot of clarity. It also explains why there is still a significant amount of information that remains undisclosed at this point in time, as it has not yet been clarified. Numerous aspects are being withheld due to the belief that this could potentially reveal a great deal about the actual occurrences. And now, look here. When this Joseph receives the land of Goshen from the Pharaoh, and indeed, at that time, Tanis shared a common border with Egypt, and it appears that the Mitannian nobles provided pharaohs and kings. Then they also have Scottish and Irish ancestors. Just that is historically significant, what I'm saying. Unbelievable. And this is confirmed by DNA analysis. He received the land of Goshen. The land of Goshen was given to Joseph by Pharaoh. I assume that this is a fragment of an ancient homeland. It is believed to have originated from Joseph and his ancestors. It is possible that not only Isaac and Joseph, but also Abraham, all hailed from Italy. This belief is based on the biblical account, which states that we also dwelled in Haran for a significant period of time. It was in ancient Britain, if we refer to the timeline as the 14th century and not the 17th to 20th century. Haran was, in fact, the capital of Mitanni, which was renowned as one of the largest cities, specifically known for its religious cult sites. Wow, it fits perfectly. And the city of Ur, from which Abraham escaped with his father Terah to Haran or relocated, was previously the religious center of the same cult that was also practiced there, just before Abraham embarked on his journey to the Promised Land. Oh, behold, a sun and moon cult, worshipping neither Yahweh nor the God of the Old Testament. Astonishing indeed. Was Abraham truly a follower of the God described in the Old Testament? Is the initial question that comes up. Or was he forced into all of this? Has a vengeful, jealous, and bloodthirsty God been imposed on him? Abraham, Isaac, Rebekah, and all descendants the God of the Old Testament, Emil the villain of the story. And in reality, they were quite different. Very interesting. However, I am able to inform you and disclose that Rebekah, despite being identified as Aramean in the Bible, also had indirect connections to Aramea. Amuru Arameans. But she also possessed royal lineage. I will inform you about that at a later time. That casts an entirely different light on the story, a very significant one indeed. The distortions of the main characters of the story from the 18th century are a crucial aspect that shapes the narrative. Dynasty, especially Amenhotep III and above all Akhenaten, truly dazzling personalities. Tut finally Amun. After that, he can be the second for 4 years. That is also an incredible story what happened there. Then King Adam was exceptionally extraordinary, unbelievably extraordinary. We have a much better understanding when we realize that these biblical events actually took place in the same century and are intricately interconnected, deeply significant, and of utmost importance. That was the missing puzzle piece I needed. I couldn't believe that Tut's tomb was being distorted by other stories and financial interests behind it. That may always be a contributing factor, but it wasn't the main reason for me. It is always about a more global agenda that one pursues. Very, very intriguing and thought-provoking. Yes, so we will continue to follow the story. I will be able to gradually tell you more about it in the future, and for now, I'll leave it at that today. Wishing you a blessed week. Be safe, protected. Goodbye.